this look. This is the best press I ever had. But let's start from the beginning. Hi, I just spent 10 minutes madly scavenging all of my eyeshadow palettes looking for an inner corner highlight. I bet you can relate. Welcome to the Art App, a place where we try to streamline things. I am always in a dire need of a very good inner corner pop. And this one is a very common situation. Face is done, eyes are done, lips are also done, but then I see that something is missing. And in the majority of cases, it is an inner corner highlight. So I start opening all of my palettes looking for the one. But this one is too dark. And this one is too sparkly. This one is too pink. At this moment, I'm definitely getting extremely frustrated and, of course, late. So today, why not to ease this process down and expect each of my palettes pull out all the shades that might serve me well as inner corner highlights. By the way, you might be wondering why I actually need one. Turns out it really complements my makeup looks and it actually suits a lot of my makeup preferences. So maybe if you're feeling that something is off in your makeup look, try inner corner highlight. I would suggest trying it in the evening when you are having a nice makeup therapy session, not when you are in the rush or not 10 minutes before something serious is about to happen. Don't do that. Without any further ado, let's get a deep dive into my eyeshadow collection. This is my whole collection of eyeshadow palettes, the ones where all the pans are depotted so they can be very easily removed. And this is the DIY magnetic palette that I have done. You will find the video somewhere here of tutorial how to do that. I'll put all the eyeshadows that are deemed to be inner corner appropriate into that palette. Let's get started. We'll start with Huda Beauty Amethyst Obsession. This is a very old palette in my collection, and luckily I know exactly which shade I'm going for. This light pink is going to be a great inner corner highlight. I will swatch all of them at the end. This is my very first ColourPop palette, and on opening the palette, my eyes are immediately drawn to Slated, but I usually use it as my one and done eyeshadow. I put it all over the lid. I've never actually used it as my inner corner highlight. And you know what? I leave it as it is because I love the way it looks all over my lid. I'll maybe take this one. It's Boa. This is obviously my second ColourPop palette, and upon opening it, you might think it's a little bit boring, but actually it is extremely versatile. I travel with the palette all the time. A lot of shades here are extremely good multitaskers. So let's not get sidetracked. Inner corner highlight. I think the brightest shade here is this one. It's one of the best silvers that I actually have in my collection. This palette is not known for good BH quality. Nevertheless, I try to use the maximum of it. The most common inner corner highlight that I use from this palette is this. I think it's a multi-chrome. It's like peachy pink shifty shade. It is a pretty popular shade, and I bet you can find it in a lot of other brands. This is Pat Mcgrath attempt to make more budget-friendly eyeshadows. Personally, I love this palette. I use it a lot, especially after I learned how to make sure that this shade is not creasing on me. So theoretically, this one is the only candidate to be an inner corner highlight. But as for me, it is still a little bit too dark. So maybe let's put this palette aside and think it through a little bit later. This palette is in my project pan and it's beaten a lot. Unfortunately, there are no inner corner highlights. The only possible candidate could be tempera, but I have already finished it, so I'll just leave it aside. The second IBH palette that I have is obviously Soft Glam. So it does have tempera, and I'm tempted to use it as an inner corner highlight, but maybe glistening of fairy would be better. I think I like fairy more. Yeah, because it doesn't have an obvious like pinkish peachy shift. I will go with fairy. I love it when the eyeshadows are magnetic, so you can easily stick it in your palette. One of the most expensive palettes that I have, Pat Mcgrath Mothership 3. And as you can see, it's extremely grungy palette. I think I will go with this shade. It's Skin Shop Fever. Blueberry Muffin is actually one of the most used palettes in my collection. Even though it might look a little bit intimidating because you have 1, 2, 3 blues, but if you cover them, you will see that it is actually very good and very nice neutral palette. The best inner corner that I can see here is Sugared. It has, as far as I remember, slightly greenish sparkles. Maybe also Delish. I think it's a little bit too dark to be an inner corner highlight. Okay, let's leave it aside for the time being. Lost and Los Angeles, my only pastel palette, and I want to grab this shade. It's Rush Hour. And maybe something else. No, I think the rest is a little bit dark. Maybe this green one? Still a little bit too dark. I need something more pastel-y. e.l.f. New Classics. This palette suffered all of my depotting experimenting, and as you can see, it's beaten thoroughly. When opening it, I immediately thought of Beloved maybe as an inner corner eye shade, but this shade from BH Cosmetics is practically the same. Maybe let's go on the greener side and take this one. It is called Gilded. This is my only palette from Cosmic Beauty, and I know exactly which shade I will pull out. Softly. I grabbed this palette specifically for this shade as my inner corner highlight. Doing that prompted me to do this kind of video. By the way, do you happen to pull out eyeshadow palette only because of the one specific shade and you know exactly where you would put that shade every time? Because for me, that is Softly. Okay, my last palette from Pat Mcgrath, and it's definitely on the darker side. Let's go with this one. I don't have any purplish shades, so this one should hopefully work. The shade is called Lunar Lavender. Oh, it's a very appropriate name. The only palette from Nomad Cosmetics that I have, it is Paradise Island, and I also know exactly which shades I'm going to pull out of it because I used this palette specifically for the shade Bora Bora and the shade Sky. Try pairing this shade with something silver. You will get one of the most sophisticated and eye-catching eye looks you've ever tried. Believe me, I tried it and I got so many compliments. The biggest colorful eye palette that I have is Blends by Blend Bunn. I think I'll try to put something that would complement the DIY palette that we have here. I will go for Secrets. I think we do need something that is this light yellow. And Inside Joke. Now let's get a closer look on the palette that we have just created. Now looking at it, I would say that this one is definitely too dark.
Let's try this one because they are too similar. I like the shade from Pat Mcgrath Mothership, so I will take this one all out as well.
So now I have pulled out all of my eyeshadows that I deem to be good to be inner corner highlights, but I was feeling that it was still missing something. For instance, I couldn't find light lavender or light blue in order to put it in my inner corner in this even makeup look. I actually don't have anything like this in my collection, so why not just make them? In order to franken 2 shades, we will need a set of tools. But do not worry, those are not something fancy. Those are things that I bet you can find somewhere at your home. First of all, I use this plastic insert as a cutting board for grinding and mixing my eyeshadows. Secondly, you will need the pans where you would put the actual eyeshadows. These are the pans from ABH palettes. You will also need something to press the eyeshadow into the pan. And for this purpose, I use this Yves Saint Laurent mini lipsticks because it perfectly fits into the pan. And some spatula to scrape the product. As I mentioned before, we are going to do a light blue and light purple. Light blue will be Dalish from Blueberry Muffin. And the purple we will get from the blends. It is Giggle. The white pigment that is going to dilute a little bit of this blue and purple will be a white shade. I think it is called Sing Along from this That's Taupe palette from Essence. I rarely use this palette, so this is one of the ways how I can actually use it. Firstly, let's scrape a little bit of white. Now a little bit of blue. I would suggest you start small because you can always add a little bit more pigment. Maybe a little bit more. Now mixing time. I think that should be enough. Let's try it out. That should work. The only problem is that it looks like I mixed too little of pigment. It will be not enough to cover the pan, so I will add a little bit more of white and a little bit more of blue. More mixing. So that is the original shade. This is the first time we mix it, and this is the second one. I definitely like the second one more. Now let's put it into the pan. Now let's get it evenly distributed in the pan. As you can see, I'm not using alcohol. That's mainly because I prefer the dry method of pressing eyeshadows because I believe it will not change the formula. I also place a clean plastic insert over the pan, so whenever I press it with my lipstick, the product doesn't stick to the lipstick. We try to distribute the product as evenly as possible. Now it's time to press. Make sure that you press firmly. Let's see what we got. Oh, that's pretty good press, I would say. Unfortunately, we got a little bit of the product at the sides, but overall, it should be pretty okay. Next time, make sure that you add more product because very often why your pan when you are pressing is crumbling very easily is because the product that you have it is very thin, so it's harder for it to hold together. Let's try to do the purple. But before that, I need to do some cleaning. Now when everything got clean, let's try to press the purple. The procedure is the same, so please follow along. Here I'm scraping a little bit of giggle from Blend Bunny's blends. This time I added so much white that I got a pan in this shade. Be prepared for a lot of mixing if you want a well-blended eyeshadow. Don't forget about swatch check. Here I see that I put too much white, so I add even more of that purple pigment. Second swatch check, and it looks great to me. Here I make sure that I put into the pan every little bit of that powder. Don't forget to evenly disperse the product into the pan because otherwise you won't get an even press. That's definitely one of the best eyeshadow pressed I ever had. And here is the promised swatch time. It is done. Let's try it out. I'm so excited to see how it works. Oh yeah. What do you think? Do you see the difference? Because I do. I think that somehow my makeup looks more unified. What are your thoughts? By the way, the brush that I usually use for my inner corner highlight is this Morphe M213. It is pretty dense, but it has a sharp edge, which helps you to get into all the crevices of your eye. I love the way it turned out. Okay, so I'm planning to use this palette for a month and I will update you on different looks and how actually relevant and coherent this palette turned out to be and how often I actually use it. So definitely subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Thank you so much for staying with me today. I'll see you next time. Bye. Maybe I can try also the shade from Nomad Cosmetics. It is Bora Bora. I love this look.